Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Very excited to have our special guest here with us, and welcome to our first Creative Technologist talk for 2026, which is very exciting. Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're gathered here today on the traditional lands of Victorian Aboriginal clans, and I'd like to acknowledge all their cultural practices and knowledge systems. We recognise at State Library Victoria that our state collection holds traditional cultural knowledge belonging to Indigenous communities in Victoria and also around the entire country. And we support communities to protect the integrity of this information gathered from their ancestors in the colonial period. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present who've handed down this knowledge and systems of practice for successive generations for millennia. And I'd also like to pay and acknowledge and pay respects to any First Nations staff and colleagues and friends who might be joining us today. My name's Anna Takia. I'm Head of Digital Strategy, Research and Insights at State Library Victoria. And I'm extremely excited to be able to present to you our very special guest, Dr. Ines Vodopivec. Vodopivec. And as said, I didn't need to pronounce her last name, but I'm going to give it a try because I think it's a beautiful one. You said it means the drinker of water. Yeah, and names are important and they tell us a lot about where we come from and our stories. So it's really wonderful to have Ines with us at the library today. Ines is really a leading voice in digital heritage, AI, and the evolving role and future of libraries. She has a really extensive and very impressive CV, and I'll let her talk more about what she's done and her areas of specialisation. But amongst many other things, her leadership in the library space includes serving as Deputy Director of the National Library of Slovenia, and she's also Vice Dean at Nova University in Ljubljana. She's also an active member of UNESCO's Memory of the World National Committee. In addition to that, she's here today speaking as Secretary General of AI for LAM. And AI for LAM, which many of you will be familiar with, is AI for Libraries, Archives and Museum. It's involved in global cooperation around the sharing of knowledge and practices and how they're evolving in the libraries, archives and museum spaces. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Ines to State Library Victoria, and thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you also for giving me this opportunity. It's amazing, what a crowd. I will start with AI, but before I do that, I would like to share a bit of a background of what I have been doing in the last 20 years. One is the official roles that we hold and we have, but the other is actually the research background and where we got our experiences from. So I'm not an AI developer, I'm actually a book historian, a codicologist. So I started in a monastery, in a Franciscan monastery in Slovenia, working in their 16th century collection, cataloging. So I have all the licenses for cataloging. I know all the different materials, restoration practices, etc., etc. But since then, I worked in a lot of digitization projects. That means that, for example, if you want to think about the medieval reading culture or any other aspect of cultural heritage materials, of course, typically today you digitize it, you make it available, you do OCR, HDR, whatever technology you use, so that you provide data for the final users, for the researchers, for students, etc., etc. So all of these projects that you see here are something connected with that. So we did Digital Encyclopedia of Natural and Cultural Heritage of Slovenia in 2010. We were working on an impact project that's Abbey Fine Reader, if you know. That was a huge project. All Europe was cooperating. 2010, 2011. We did some UNESCO Memory of the World co-financed projects for the incunabula, for digitization of incunabula all over Europe. We did Reading in the Middle Ages projects with some partners from Europe. Maybe I didn't mention before, but I'm also in the management board of Europeana. I don't know how much you know about Europeana. You know, okay. So it's a huge network that we're building and working together as a community also. Besides that, and that was something that, of course, as a librarian and art historian, none of us can escape. We were working on the cataloging databases, we were working on the e-resources, on repositories, on open science. I'm sure you also work with open science here as well as we do in Europe. Worked on all different sorts of connecting different systems in one huge, big, connected database. Through these years, through these 20 years, of course, everything was kind of connected with digitization, accessibility, and reuse. We still think a lot about reuse, but in later years, we got artificial intelligence, which is here, it's not going to go away. So we can hate it, we can refuse it, we can have doubts, but it's here, and we maybe also can use it for our own purposes and our own workflows in our institutions. I'm not addressing here the generic AI, what we use, for example, to improve our emails, to maybe make a nice letter to the boss, which we don't want to hurt or something like that. So I'm not talking about that. That you can use in any case. I'm talking about the adapted systems for, okay, libraries, archives, and museums, but typically today I have more of the libraries examples, but I think one or two are also more museum appropriate, but nevertheless, maybe just for your knowledge or maybe some insights. So AI is here, and of course it's changing, and it's really changing the whole systems, how we work and how we operate and how we think also. So it's changing the users and their perspectives on the how to use data and access information. It changes the how we work with data and how we provide data. And of course, it also changes the institutional workflows, how we organize our work. And of course, it also changes what the meta or data is, or what is that we should, as cultural heritage institutions, provide to final users. We'll come back on that. So this is kind of a schedule for today. Okay. So we're first going to go into the human perspective. So us as librarians, creators of data, enablers of data access, and then users' perspective of how they perceive us and how they perceive the data to be given to them. Employees, sorry, I was also the employer. I'm also an employer, but I'm also an employee. We have a huge fear of change. That's not something that is only connected with AI. I'm sure many of you, as I did, started with the card catalogs. Then we went to DOS systems. Is it right? Yeah. Okay. It was a change. It was sometimes a rebellion among employees to do that. Then we went from DOS to Windows kind of systems. It's true? Yeah, and today we have open repositories. Okay, these were all steps of changes. The only thing that is different now with AI is that it's happening too fast. So all of those changes, we had some years to adapt. You can think about what metadata schema you use in your library. Is it Mark 21? Is RDA system, whatever system you used. So you had some time to think about it and to make a strategy to implement it. Then you have some years to educate your staff to be able to work. You had some licenses for cataloging, et cetera, et cetera. But now the change is shifting in months, not in years. And we as human beings are not able to perceive that change as a positive one. And that is also at the beginning of our fears of what will happen. Not only with our jobs, but also of, for example, if the technology is used, what will be the results? What will be the output, actually? Will it work the way we need to work? Will the output be the way we want it, et cetera, et cetera? So this is the first thing that we are dealing with in the as employees. Then skills and knowledge gaps. Of course, most of us, because we are information specialists, we know something about how to work with computers, how to work with data, et cetera, maybe more than in some other professions. But still, of course, AI is completely different system than it was before. And because we know, and it's a lot of also in the media, this hallucinations, et cetera, so we have this gap of how to deal with the technology, that it's not already in place in our workflows, and it's not already a part of our systems that we already know. Next thing that is happening, the profiles are changing. So new generations are coming. They are completely into tech. They don't think about card catalogs. They never saw a metadata on the card catalog, how it should be written, how we know it should be written. Then, of course, also the quality of services. We're also thinking about will the quality of our services, because we still need to be the trustful institution that provides information to the final users, will the quality be still the same as it was before? So then we have users. Okay, on the other side, on one side employees, on the other side users. So they are completely different than they were before. Why? They're used to ChatGPT, they're used to generic AI, they're used to typing a few words in Google prompt and they get all the results immediately. That is true today. But if we think back, in any IFLA conference that I remember from before, it was always, yes, how we can access our final users. They're not coming back to the library. Everybody's going to Google. That was even before AI. That's nothing different than it was 20 years ago. Now, the only difference is that every generation is going to Google, not only maybe the young ones, the ones, et cetera, et cetera. So also, for example, students or some other that needed to come to the library to have reliable resources for their research, they, of course, go first to some generic tools. So access to information is different. Then search information also. So they search and they want to have the answer right away. They don't want to spend hours searching, browsing on the shelves for the materials that they can use for their own purposes. They expect information differently. If before a librarian could sit behind the counter and say, yes, yes, you have to search for the shelf number in the catalog, and then you go in the third floor, and then in the, I don't know in which part, and then you find that book you are searching for. Well, they don't expect that anymore, and they don't want to do that anymore. They want to have the information as an abstract from all the resources you have in digital library, in the repository, in any other collection that you have. And that is a huge change that they expect from us also. And of course, they also process and use information differently. So the generations that are coming with the educational systems that are now implemented already on the university level, the new users are also more knowledgeable of how to use technology, and they also are aware if they use AI tools that they, for example, have to write it, for example, in the thesis or something like that. So they understand that the new technology is something that they need to also provide information that they use it. So it's a bit of a changing process in that direction. Nobody cited in the thesis that they're using the library catalog, or did they? Only for special collections, maybe sometimes, but typically for the catalogs, not. So it's a huge change in the user perspective. Institutions are also changing. What is changing? We know we have gaps and needs. We know that if we want to serve the purpose that we have, if we want to serve the society for the reason that we were established, and also for the reason that we are financed at the end, we have to address the changing environment. So what we do is we educate and train our employees. We did that also before. I was in for example, in training of Excel use. I'm sure most of you were here also on the Excel use trainings, etc., etc. So we do that. So as libraries, we understand that education is important. We also train users. In some libraries, like at the University of Virginia, they also have the training programs for use of AI with library resources. We seek for new skills and we recruit new profiles. Later, I have here AI librarian. I already saw in few cases that libraries are seeking for AI librarian as a job position. So you can actually apply and be an AI librarian employed in a library, like it was a data scientist or any other profiles that are merged in last maybe 10 years or so. We are also addressing ethical issues. And for this part, there's no common ground, not on national level typically, but not even on regional or global. Ethical issues are of huge concern also when it comes to multilingual use of metadata. We are all speaking English, but we started also with a bit of acknowledgements and Slovenian. Smaller language groups, Slovenia is less than 2 million of us living all together. So small language groups, we have issues developing large language models because we don't have enough of data to feed it in. So, of course, whenever we are talking about ethical issues, is always a case of shall we use modern material, because if you use historical material, the output is completely different, etc., etc. So there's a lot of, I'll say, layers of that ethical issues that are in place. So the workflows are also changing. I started with metadata, and I will be addressing metadata further on today through the talk, because I think this is one of the most important, I'll say, workflows that we have in libraries. And typically, I'll say at least 30% of personnel in each library is somehow related to the metadata creation. I don't know what's your percentage here, but in national libraries typically is around 30%. And of course, we are, and we can be also a common voice to the, first I'll say big players, but then I'll also say on the governmental policy level, providing guidance, but also providing support, and also speaking about the use of data on the more, I'll say, trustful way on the national level in any country, no matter on where on which side of the world. Okay, but as I said, education is really important. So education and training is one of the most important things that we have to address and we have to think about in our institutions if we want our personnel to be able to work with the final users in the decades to come. But we know that because we are librarians and we always do that, and that's nothing new. Okay, the data. Typically librarians, when we talk about data, is metadata. It's catalog and it's descriptive metadata. There is the, how do you say, the first one, so the author, and I don't find the word now. So you have metadata that is typically in the catalogs, but now, of course, this is completely different. So you don't have only catalog as metadata material. You have, okay, digitally born material, which can be also full text search. It can be if it's digitized and you have OCR or HTR, you have full text search and you have the data that is of full objects. You have harvested web. I don't know if you do that. IIPC, you know, so you have harvested web is one of the biggest databases that we can use. But typically in libraries, when we have catalogs and we send our users to find information in our databases, we never combine both. So the results that are coming from the catalog or the repositories are never also combined with the results from the harvested web. So that's a huge part of the data that we have it, but we I'm saying neglect it, but we have it somewhere stored and we don't use it as proper or as well as we could. So the data, the thinking about the data is changing. Here in the center is a picture of, I'll say, a future library. There are a few of them also. I think Library of Congress has something similar, and Danish Library and British Library also. So this is the library without the librarian. This is just a robot. And there's no shelving system anymore. So the book can be each time in different box because it's GPS driven and the robot finds the book. So, okay, we can say it's wild because the users cannot go inside. There's too low temperature and too little oxygen to work in those storages. But on the other side, the book can never be lost. Why? Because if you have users among your shelves, they're putting the books on the wrong shelf, it will be very difficult to track it back. So this is a system that is working perfectly, actually, and it's also all digitized data. The National Library of Norway could do that. Why? Because they digitized everything. And I'll show you later on how they did it, also with the help of AI. So they have digitized everything. Everything. They're lacking the material now, so now they're digitizing the police archives, national police archives, all the material of museums, etc., etc., etc. And they're all storing this in the similar storages, which are completely automatized. Okay, so Library of the Future. We have to understand why we are addressing data and why the data is important for us. So if we had before catalogs, repositories, digitized, digitally born, today, and I'll start speaking about the global players, because I think we have to think about our role in the society in the future. Today, this is a very small part of all the data that is interesting for the training of models, for use of models. Because you have internet as a huge database, which can be already, because it's open, it's already harvested. This is how our models for the language, for example, models were trained. They harvested the web. They didn't even touch your collections. They're not even interested in your collections because it's too small and it's not accessible. It's somewhere there stored at the back. So they're not even thinking about that. They already trained the models on the everyday data they can access on the internet. And that's a complete change of where are we and how are we important in the global system of information sharing. This is something that we really have to think about. That's why I'm asking you. We have open science. Medical research is open. Chemistry, open. Space, open. Nanotechnology, biotechnology, everything is open. Everything is open. And we're closing our cultural heritage. We don't want to share our cultural heritage. We're closing it down, and we are only the gatekeepers of the ones that can access our cultural heritage. So sometimes I understand. I am coming from that's why I started with that. I'm a codecologist. I'm in love with the smell of old books. It's amazing. But if we want to stay in the game, we will have to play the game. So here is something that we will need to think about how and what to do to be there, to be present, to be visible. I'm not sure how is it with you with AI factories, but in Europe we have this now all European infrastructural movement, and there are a lot of AI factories established, also quantum computers. These are huge, very capable systems that can process a lot of data. GLAM institutions, so galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, typically we are all cooperating one way or another as data providers in research projects. I'm sure you're also facing that because we're typically always invited to provide kind of a data in research projects. Our data can be used for AI training models. It can be used in AI factories, which is already happening. For example, in Poznan supercomputer in Poland, they established a network to cover the national system of science and culture, and they have like a hub. I mean, it's a house where you have storages of quantum computers and HPCs together to support all the science and all the culture on the national level. That's, I think, an interesting case. I don't have it here. Maybe next time I will insert it. But it's something that keeps us working with the big tech. We have our data storages also, which can also provide data. So if you are harvesting web, you have long-term preservation, storage access. You have also, I'm sure you use IIIF. I'm sure you use a lot of protocols. So you are already working with, and you have some data that can be shared and that can be used, and that can be implemented into all workflows so that we can serve the final users. But the final user, of course, although we are typically serving more, individual users or some research groups, some research projects, typically the final user now can also change. And I'll showcase you later on. So I'm sure you know that, so I will not repeat it. But the one thing that I still keep this slide is because, of course, what data you give into the model is what the information that you get out. It's just a calculation. It's nothing else. Even if they have enhanced workflows in 2025, and there's some thinking of that we have now systems that are rational, that are thinking rational, it's not true. The computer is not rational. It will never cry. That's for sure. Or it will never smile. I mean, you can implement the workflow that it will act as it does, but it's not doing on its own. So you have systems that combine workflows, and that it seems like it would be rational because it is built in a way that it combines information that it calculates from different workflows, which was created by human at the back, but it's not. It's actually just calculation. So it's still all about the data that we provide into the model. For that reason, we can be an important part of the infrastructures that are building on the data of today. we can be the ones that can be important for science, for industry, tourism, culture, education, whichever level of a national infrastructures that you can think. But we have to have a voice. We have to be visible. We have to stand up. Because if we're just sitting at the back and trying to neglect the technological development, we will never get there. So the way to success is collaboration. And here I'll talk a little bit about the artificial intelligence for libraries, archives, and museums, and how it all started, and why I am standing here today. We started in 2018. There were a few institutions working together, and they established a community. The community started with the Fantastic Futures event, and I'm sure some of you were in Canberra 2 years ago, in 2024. But now we have more than 1,500 members globally, and we established also as a sustainable organization in December last year, with almost, now we are at 50 organizations joining with a memorandum of understanding. The institutions are all of the big ones, so from Stanford, Harvard, Rijksmuseum, I don't know, you have them all here, to also smaller ones. Because we think that we need to, if we want to make a change, we need to go in the field. So that every institution, and I can, for example, give you my example. So I said Slovenian population is small, but also National Library is small because it cannot be big. Okay, so we have to perform all the duties of the National Library, but we have only 130 people altogether. Okay, but you still have to have legal deposit, you have to digitize, we have restoration, all the collections, exhibitions, education of final use, everything. We have to cover everything, but we are 130. Okay, and we also, our finances are also way smaller than of any other, for example, of these institutions. But we could still join because the system is built in a way that everybody needs to go into the process of, I'll say, digital transformation. Digital transformation because, and I'll speak about this now, AI is just another digital tool. So what is more, the community is connected with Europeana and the Network Association, where it's also 6,000 people. So if you're not, you can be, it's free, join, follow our communities, follow work of copyright communities and other communities, and see what's happening in Europeana. And we are also issuing blueprints, policy papers, et cetera, to stitch the policymakers and others who are thinking about strategical implementation of AI in cultural heritage. What is more, we are also connected with archival networks, and I don't know if you know Time Machine maybe, but it's also a huge community that's working with the data. So the community is, I'll say, threefold. You have GLAM representatives, you have university representatives, and you have developers. And in all different communities, they work together. And that's the most important part of the structure, because only with cross-sectoral collaboration, we can actually, if we all exchange knowledge and ideas, we can make a progress and go a step further. Because otherwise, we are just sitting in our silos and we're not reaching out of the knowledge that we have. And with collaboration, we can actually, because we all have similar issues and also opportunities in digital environment, we can all reach further. What is also interesting is, and I did some analysis of the network, is that a lot of heads of collections, directors, managers, etc., so the ones that need to develop the strategies are a part of our networks, because they need to have the idea of where we are going, in which direction, and how to lead organizations to develop further. Okay, so the power of change is in collaboration as such, and the power of change is also in the trustful solutions of AI. And this is, so trustful information, trustful solutions, trustful implementation is something that we can provide different than, and I'll say, big players, global players. Because they are using, of course, the information that is everywhere accessible, but we have the curated information. We have collections that have been built for decades, even more. So we have the information that can be really trustful for the final user. That's why we are trying to develop the skills and educate professionals working in the cultural heritage sector, but we're also trying to accelerate developing and testing of tools. And we have some, I'll say a few, okay, this is from member organizations, this is maybe for later, but in any case, we have a few work groups where professionals join together to work on particular subjects and topics. Okay, one is evaluation group, where we are evaluating different AI tools to use for our own purposes. We have metadata working group, also with people working together on the metadata creation. We have speech-to-text working group for extraction of speech from the, for example, videos and et cetera, et cetera. And we also have teaching and learning working group, where we provide webinars and materials for the employees of cultural heritage institutions. These are the, I say always, the old working groups, which are there established from the 2018 and are already, I'll say, old ones. But we also have new ones that are emerging now. Some of them, like cybersecurity, are really interesting for today's work of organizations. So cybersecurity, AI literacy, for example, infrastructures, so how to build protocols to access our collections and similar. So you're all invited to join our working groups. You can also follow us on Slack on other channels that we have. And, well, just use the knowledge that you can then implement in your own work. I will showcase something now, which I also think is important, and that is that when we speak about digital humanities, and I'm sure you do that every day, there's no digital humanities anymore, because you cannot do research if you don't in humanities if you don't use digital tools. So there's no digital humanities, it's only humanities. Similar goes with artificial intelligence. There's no artificial intelligence. That's an umbrella term that covers all different topics of new technology. We have vector analysis. We have 3D AI reconstruction, for example. We have data management and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have many other technologies that we can use in our workflows. And AI is just kind of a covering the overall subject, and the problem with that is that AI is also in media every day for generic AI, which is completely different than what we're speaking about here now. So what we do in our network is that organizations are, of course, they use AI for internal purposes and external purposes, as well as they develop their own AI tools and services, and they use the ones on the market, adapt it and adopt it to their own systems and train it on their own material. This is already happening now. This is a workflow that was created by the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. So this is what they do also. I will go now into the examples. So I'll start with the strategy implementation. Before I go further, you have here examples. If any of the examples is interesting to you, please reach out to me. I'll get you in contact with the colleagues from other organizations so we can exchange, they can share with you, etc., etc. This is just to showcase because there's never enough time. Okay, so Library of Congress has an interesting strategy. They're already implemented. If you would want to know more about it, please contact me or through Anna, and we can share the information further. Then we have University of Virginia. I already spoke about AI literacy, which is so important, not only for the final users, but also the staff of the library and staff also of the university. So they developed a few pillars on which they are educating their personnel, but also the students. Then we have, maybe this is interesting, National Library of Norway supported automation and mass digitization. I said a little bit before that they digitized everything. So what they did, they digitized, for example, newspapers, but they didn't do it by volume and number of each newspaper. They just digitized everything. Like they cut the backs of the newspapers and they just digitized the whole collection. The problem was then that they had a human in the loop sitting behind a computer, searching for first and last page of each number. Can you imagine that after 8 hours, after a month? It was awful. So of course there was a lot of mistakes also, because at the one point you cannot see anymore which pages are the ones that you have to point. So they developed an AI tool that does that for them. It's 100%. It doesn't make mistakes. So it's perfect. So it's something that can take a lot of time and a lot of manual work, which is done in seconds. So this is, for example, a nice showcase that maybe would be interesting to use for you. Then again, National Library of Norway, they are not just using AI to enhance workflows, they also develop their own AI. And they are working on the Norway national model, and they developed 16 language models for Norwegian language. They do that because they believe that the Norwegian language needs to be implemented in Google search the same as English is. So there are only 3 million. I mean, Norway is a very rich country, but the population is small. So they want to be visible on, and they did this, and they gave them the models to Google for free, just to be implemented into the searches. What is more, they cooperated with the government, and the government supported, and they are refunding the authors which publish the books now, and also newspapers and publishers, to use the modern language, so the things that are now coming out, they can use for training the material. But the government is reimbursing the authorial rights for the use of the material for training. So that's also an interesting case. And what is more, they cooperate at the moment with Norwegian Health and Care Services, that's an agency, who is a final user of the data they can provide, because they're developing an AI model to support all activities in Norwegian language for their health services. So the final user, in their definition, completely changed for a person, individual, or a research group to a global player like Google and OpenAI, and also other agencies, governmental organizations, and other sectors. So they're completely redefining who the users of National Library data is. So then, okay, we spoke a lot about the metadata creation. I have here an example from the Belgium National Library. They had a lot of, and we all have, I'm sure, a lot of backlog with retro-catalogization first. So they implemented an AI tool so that they scan first and last pages of book, and the AI tool extracts the metadata from the scanned pages. First, they started with the retro-cataloging for that purpose, and now this is a part of the workflow that they do on the national level. And if you may be interested, our colleague there, Hannes, published also a book if you want to read it, so maybe interesting to know. Then you have Standford University. They are also, of course, working with AI. What they did is maybe a different case. They have a huge pictorial collection with no descriptions, so with no alt text. They have only just really, really short metadata and descriptions. And of course, they implemented an AI tool that can search and browse the affinity of the pictures, for example, style or something like that, not only the basic descriptions. But I think this was presented in Canberra 2 years ago. Next thing that is also interesting, I think also this was in Canberra, is that they have a Japanese printed collection with the historic Japanese language that nobody knows how to read. So what they did, they tested 6 AI tools to produce the alt text to description of the collection, so that at least it's searchable in some way for the final users. So this is also one use, you can use the AI. Bibliothèque Nationale de France, I'm sure you know this is one of the biggest digital libraries, at least in Europe. And they have up to 100 million of illustrations with no metadata. It's impossible to find anything in that collection, really. So they also implemented an AI tool that is functioning on the iconographical layer of the illustrations, so you can find and search and browse the collection. Then we have National Gallery of Art in Washington. They have a huge collection. They also have Da Vinci, for example, and other important pieces. But they also have an archive of, this is a paper sheet that's similar like we had before on the card catalogs, but it's a paper sheet. And they developed a tool that extracts the metadata. This metadata archive was produced through the years and years and years of not very standardized way, from typewriting to handwriting, etc., etc. So their tool is really extracting the metadata well and is implemented in the e-resources, and it also gives you similar results to the ones that are already that you already searched for, and it's working on the content level. Then you have, for example, one institute from Swiss. They also developed a metadata search. So pictorial, visual search, visual analysis without the metadata, and the extraction of metadata from the card catalogs. But this is from the archival collection, but it's something similar that we also have in libraries. Then we have a probabilistic indexing of archival material, which is, I don't know if you have that in your collections, but in our collections we have a lot of this, we say the book of death and the book of marriages, which is typical in some archbishopcy, etc., etc. Everybody that was born or died, it was inscribed. So you can work with a tool and you can tell, it will give you some results, and then you will learn on the basis of what you say which result is right and which is wrong. So we can teach the tool to work with the final user when you're searching for a specific name or specific topic. Okay, this is maybe just for like an interesting, but it's more maybe for the museums. An institute developed the 3D detection of AI. Here we have a graffiti on the frescoes, also 3D scanning together with the AI, and then also detection of the motifs on the 3D objects on the museums, which can be also used for the restoration purposes and detection of the motifs on the materials. Speech to text, I already mentioned before. We have a working group which is working on tools for extraction of text from the movies and, for example, TV shows and other materials. What is interesting from their work is that the tools that they're working on now are also giving you the names of the speakers, not only the spoken word, but also who is speaking. So the tool is detecting the speakers also. This case I like, I won't say the most, but it's most user-oriented. As I said, the users expect information differently. So what in Luxembourg did, they implemented a chatbot in their digital library, and the chatbot extracts the information from the digital resources that are available in the digital library, and it gives you the abstract, like similar like ChatGPT, but it only uses the resources that are in the library. That means that are reliable and trustful. Of course, if you have an old, I'll say, medical article in your library which is outdated and it's not valid anymore, of course, that's the information that is also in the library, but the fact that it's cataloged and in the library resources is still important for the final user to use further. While it gives you the abstract of everything, all the material, it also gives you all the references to the materials further on. And then what is more, it works in 4 different languages. So when I was there, we were searching in English, but it searched also for example, German resources. It translated the German resources in English, and it was incorporated into the feedback that was given to me when I was searching there with the prompt. So it really is multilingual and also, I think, very useful for the final user, and of course it also works on different electronic devices. I will just touch upon Harvard at the end. They have something similar like Collection Explorer, but I would not go into how they did it, but I would invite you to look at YouTube channel of AI for LAM, where you have everything open and you can search and go through the collection. Also Fantastic Features 25, which happened now in December, so everything is open and available online. So with this, I would stop. I think it took too much time. Okay, and I would, of course, be very happy to discuss with you of any aspect. You can also say you don't agree with me, which is also good. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ines. That was both action-packed and such a generous presentation, and I think it's so useful. Particularly, I know you had so many examples there, but to see some really concrete, practical case studies and applications of AI in libraries and archives. We were planning to have a bit of a conversation. I do have some questions to ask you, but I'm really aware that there'll probably be a lot of questions from the floor, and I wanted to kind of invite you into conversation here because I know we've got a lot of metadata specialists. We have folks from museums and archives as well as from the State Library. So to start with, we've got a roving mic, and just a heads up as well that we are doing an audio recording of this session as well. But I just wanted to throw questions open to the floor and see if there was anyone who had a question or something they wanted to mention to Ines.
Hi Ines, thank you. That was a really insightful presentation. I had a question. I feel like so much of the adoption or aversion for AI is rooted in either fear or concern of, and that's adjacent, I guess, to core AI in catalog, but rooted in some concern with employment, workforce, jobs, etc. And from your experience and research, how has the adoption of AI in Norway or other places affected employment or roles? Were there any transferable skills through the organization? And what's that newer landscape? What does it look like? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's quite a typical concern that everybody has, but I think the environment is always changing. And I think in libraries we're not going to change from today to tomorrow, that's for sure. What is going to happen, and is already happening in a few cases, is that we can use human power for intellectual work. Let the machine do that dull typing part. But you, for example, if you have a special collection, the descriptions that are more, I'll say, more in-depth, connected to some historical background, and anything else that the tool cannot extract from the object, that's where our interference is very worth. Of course, you always have human for the quality check in the loop. That's you have to have, even if you have a machine that produces, I don't know, 10,000 of books in an hour, you still have somebody to check the quality, at least on some sequences. But another thing that is also happening is that the profiles are also developing. So, for example, when open science came up, there was huge initiatives how to re-educate also library professionals to work in open science. It's the same with AI. So what we need is to develop educational programs and systems for our librarians to be able to work with technology further on. It's not just the transition without any support. We cannot do that. And another thing that maybe I would open now, and maybe just for consideration, and I'm sure that we don't agree, but I will still open it. Do we still need to produce library catalogs? If we envision, and I was showcasing you a digital environment. So in 5 to 10 years, most of the material will be in digital format. We have digitized material, we have digitally born material. If you are a legal deposit institution, you can always, and in some cases, in some countries, we already adapted new legal deposit acts where you, for example, for depositing a physical book, you also provide the digital copy of it already, because it was already in digital form when it went to the printer. So it was already from start in digital form. Okay, you let it print it out and you put it in the bookstores, that's true. But you already have a digital copy somewhere. So an author, publisher, whatever has a digital. So you can always get already the digital copy. Why is that important? Not just because of AI, but also because you will not digitize that material in 10 years' time. You already have a digital one in your long-term storages. So that's kind of a plus to that. And if you have everything in digital, the AI tool will search, will browse the collection, and extra hours for cataloging, for what purpose? Does any of the final users ask you, yes, I want to have a catalog. I want to have the structure in particular structure that it's so important for us. I know, I was working on that also. So, you know, how the fields are structured, what is written in which field, which punctuation is at the end of each of the metadata. We all done that. But it's really so important. Are our users really searching for that? Is that our purpose? So that we use our lives and 8 hours per day to think about which punctuation we're going to put at the end of each metadata field? I'm not sure that if we are paid for that from the state. So you can be completely not agreeing with me. I understand, because I come from that, but it's actually something that we have to think about. So what the machine can do, let it be, but we can use our, also for example, our education to support the final user, whichever that is. It can be medical society. It can be a mother with a child. It can be providing literacy to children, to the generations to come. We will have to educate our users how to deal with the technology, to understand that why hallucination is appearing, how to deal with information in media, how to understand, and I saw that now in Singapore last week. They have an exhibition in their National Library providing the final users the differences between what is published in the news and what is really, for example, the photography from another angle or whatever. So they're doing a comparisons, and they're actually teaching the final users to understand the misleading information that we're getting in media every day. So we'll have to teach them to understand that what they get from each tool, that it still needs a little bit of rational thinking at the back. I'll give you a case. Not long ago, maybe 2 months ago, there was a rector of university in Belgium, and she was fired because she used generic AI to produce her speech. It was some important speech. That's strange in a way. But why she was actually fired? Because she, in the speech, there were some citations from different people, and the citations were wrong. And she didn't check it. I wouldn't expect from the rector of university that she would not check the information that she gets from generic AI. So you have to understand that, but okay, maybe she didn't have time, whatever, it happens, okay. But we need to teach our final users to use the tools right, to understand the output also.
Ines, just following on from that, thank you. I just wanted to circle back to how you framed the talk to begin with. You were talking about the fact that you see that AI is here and it's here to stay, and it has to be addressed by libraries and archives and museums. But you also mentioned that you saw the absolute rate and pace of change and the rapidity of that change in terms of the various fields of AI as posing a challenge. We also talked a little bit about trust and trustworthiness, of the importance of being a trustful institution. I think that was the language you used. And I was wondering if you've seen libraries, archives and museums managing and adapting with these paces of change, but also in ways that might ensure or engender trust.
Yeah, of course, attention is everywhere. So I am showcasing, for example, good examples that are happening. But of course, even, for example, from my colleagues from Standford, and they're really using AI a lot. When we come to the catalog, they're also frustrated. You know, the tool is not working 100%. It's not still adapted to the systems that they want, etc., etc. So this is not, I'll say, very limited, and it's globally. It's happening everywhere, and that's why we also have to think about it, and to exchange knowledge and step together and try to make a change for our own purposes so that we can benefit from the technology.
I think we have scope for maybe just one last question.
Thank you, Ines. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I work with the Victorian Indigenous Research Centre. My question is around Indigenous collections. There seems to be a big rush on the pace that we cannot match. A lot of the metadata isn't recorded for Indigenous collections and material in our institutions. We're still learning ourselves as people and human beings, the cultural practice and the ethics around material. We can't match a machine, and we can't train a machine with things that we don't have personally. Does the Indigenous people of Norway or Sami people or Native American, have they had experiences with their Indigenous collections being used ethically with AI?
Yeah, in Norway actually they do the model for the Sami community, so they train on the materials also for their use. So that's one of the language models that they do. But they have, I don't know if you heard about it, but the government is supporting the development. So the government is supporting also the modern authors, so that it's kind of a common loop together, so that they provide the access to the material, but they also reimburse. So they are also, the authorial rights are also paid. I mean, the government takes care of that everything works in a common system. For other purposes, it's like, okay, I can speak a Slovenian because we're a small language model and something similar. So we are working on that on the governmental level as well. So it's always about the cooperation between the policymakers, the institutions who have the material, and I'll say authors, publishers, and the ones that can, that would need to be heard and also addressed. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think we have some policy changes first before we interact with this learning machine. There's a few steps before we are there, I think. There's a lot of larger languages that we deal with, a lot of so I'm not sure if you're aware, there's 250 indigenous languages and 800 different dialects across this continent, and then about 256 years of colonization. All of our collections come from a colonial lens as well too, so that affects how a machine would pick this up too. So we're, as colleagues, in the work of doing, unlearning that things and addressing that and cataloging and metadata aspect. But I think the human comes first.
Of course.
To interpret that before the machine. And I think that's my question is just a time frame, what order we do these things. But I think you answered it with policy first and then people power.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, in some cases, not long, I think it was October or November, I'm not sure anymore, there was a presentation of student project, research project on Maori, New Zealand community language-based AI model. Also, because it was I already saying before, if you want the language to be, or languages, as you say, 250, integrated into the modern tools and services, then it needs to be trained on, and somehow. So at one point, it will need to be integrated, otherwise it will be left behind. And that's what we don't want. Another possibility is, and I didn't showcase it here, but maybe it's interesting, is that, for example, Standford developed, because you said 250 languages, Standford has that in their collection. And they have a huge map collection, geographical collection. And you know that in map collections you have rivers and, mountains in all different directions. So you cannot do the OCR or HDR because it's going in all directions. You don't have the lines to work on it. Okay. So what they did, they developed an AI tool that detects each letter as a symbol. So you don't need to have a language because it detects symbols as pictorial analysis. So when I was there, we used some old Slovenian word that is not existing anymore. And it was before the territory was different than it is now. So it's actually a part of Austria at the moment. But it's in their geographical historical collection. And the tool found all that Carinthia word everywhere in the collection, even though it's not, it's not the language it's not Slovenian language, it's not German language, it's just a historical term. So it found it because it's searched by the symbols. So each letter, one symbol. That could be maybe a case to think about.
Thank you, yeah. And I'm familiar with the Maori one too, because they had already previously recorded all the material through a former radio station too, where they had recorded the dialogue and they had inserted that too. Yeah. And I think we're still yet to do that, something like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant question. Just to wrap up, I was just wanting to ask you, Ines, if you could just say just a couple of words on what you see as a good future for libraries and AI.
Yeah, as I said already, I think it's very important that we educate ourselves, but also our users, that we think about out of the box, so that we think about where are we in the global system. Global system not as a world, but in the network system of information. So what is our role, what we have to focus on, how we provide the users the data, and that we go out of that, I'll say, librarian frame that we typically have in our heads, so that is framed with the databases and catalogs and this, out of that to providing the information in a way that new generations want and need. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ines.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.